you've got to think about who the audience of the communications are that we make during the production period of the film. And I'm not convinced that it's really the end consumer at this early stage of the life of a film. It's much more the industry. I don't believe that a potential cinema goer necessarily will remember that wonderful location report you managed to place in El País or whatever. So I think it's much more really about examining the audience for your communication, your publicity work at this stage. And it's largely industry, I think. Let's look at the factors then that kind of that bring us towards that attitude towards publicity. Things that are self-evidently enormously different from the 30s and the 40s, the great Hollywood time, when there were probably 4 or 5 unit publicists attached to each production, and they would send out reams and reams of press releases every day. They would have incredible control over the stars and indeed the director, and they were contractually obliged to do virtually everything that they were asked to do. This is, as you can imagine, radically different from the situation now. We're faced with a situation where, as I just said, budgets are incredibly tight. There is just no time. I worked with Chris Morris on Four Lions. Does that ring a bell, Four Lions? Self-evidently, you remember that this was a film, a comedy about jihadi terrorists and suicide bombers. So during the process of making of that film, it was an absolute no-brainer. We had to keep it as quiet as possible. We had to get through that shoot and diffuse stuff as much as we possibly can, so that ideas were not generated about the film that we couldn't really control during the shoot. It's much easier during the distribution process when you've actually got a film to show to people. But the worst thing is if you arrive at that distribution process with people's ideas about a film very much set. You've got to work out what the angles and stories are as far as your film is concerned, and don't blow them all now, whether it be historical or the fact that it's a particular writer or somebody's making a debut, or it's espousing a particular angle or something you're trying to get across. Be careful, because the likelihood is that if a newspaper covers that story extensively during the production period, you won't necessarily be able to go back to that crucial newspaper later. Work with the local press seems crazy, but is incredibly important. Again, in Liverpool, we needed to make sure that Nowhere Boy was really embraced by the city of Liverpool, it being a film about John Lennon. And there's nothing worse. What you're really doing is helping the production, quite frankly, to deal with the local press. They're obviously in the lifetime of the film, by comparison to the international press and the UK press, they're really not important at all. But if it's very easy to start engendering bad feelings amongst the local community, and the local press can be very dangerous as far as that's concerned. So stills, Kate's heard my speech about this many times, but they are absolutely essential. And it's amazing to me that directors and producers don't quite get how important they are. If you imagine that all this care and effort that a director, a writer, a producer has put into their film, and to getting it absolutely right, almost certainly the first thing that anybody is going to see of that film is a still image. It's as simple as that. So you know what it's like. You will go tomorrow, open a newspaper, you will see a still from a film, you'll look at a magazine this weekend, you'll look at that still from the film, and immediately you'll have a gut response to it. It interests you, it doesn't interest you. So in terms of getting across your film, it demands a lot of care and a lot of attention. The problem that we're finding is that as budgets get squeezed, the first thing to go, then mind the publicist, is the stills person. And the days that they're on the set are becoming less and less and less, and it's a big problem. It makes it very difficult for distributors at the other end. I'm sure Kate would agree with me as far as that's concerned. You'll deliver this wonderful film, but if you don't have the requisite material with which to work and to exploit that film, it's a big problem. Well, there is an option, of course, to not have any stills, but as Kate says, to get a screen grab, which is literally taking it from the image of the film. Technically, that's not as easy as all that. You would thought, well, in the old days, 35mm print would be absolutely easy, but it's very, very difficult to do that. Obviously, if you're shooting on digital, it is easier, but you don't necessarily want that particular angle from the camera. You maybe want slightly to one side, and you've got to have a wealth of opportunity, wealth of choice, it seems to me. So screen grabs do not rely on, I would say, quite frankly, delivers of BVOD. Do you know what I mean by the EPK, the electronic press kit? Okay, so this is something that, again, is a delivery requirement for a producer, and it is usually, although what's nice is that there's no great definition of it, agreed definition of it, But it is a mixture of B-roll from the shoot, that means watching the film in its production phase, interviews with the actors, and maybe I worked on Hyde Park on Hudson, Bill Murray's film, or Roger Michel's film starring Bill Murray as FDR. There was a nice story because it was this wonderful old car that had been specially adapted for him. So we did a particular video story on that car. And you're not only these days providing material for the eventual DVD release of the film, what you're doing is providing materials that is very, very valuable for the theatrical window, which I think really is the main shop window for the film, quite frankly. Materials I think we've been through, you need to tailor them for the biggest impact you possibly can. What's the USP, the unique selling prospect of the film? It may be monks playing football, I don't know, that sounds crass, whatever it may be, but you need to be able to get across the nature of your film in quite a succinct way so that the press will be able to digest it and hopefully have some interest in it. Trades at major festivals are incredibly important. You want to try and make sure that the still from your film or a feature about your film is listed wherever possible. So, you know, the person putting Screen Daily together, for example, the Screen International Daily publication here, the picture editor wants a dramatic image. He wants that his page to look as enticing and interesting as possible. So anticipate that. Photo opportunities, again, it's old school kind of stuff. You remember what they do in Cannes with people falling off the Carlton and in bee costumes, all that sort of thing. It is certainly a way of generating interest from your film if you've got something that is worthy of that. It's all about creating a buzz and an anticipation, and obviously you want to work with a good publicity company who have the respect of the international press, I think, who aren't necessarily hyping everything, but who are reliable and imaginative and will deal well for you. The festival launch is where you need to work extremely closely, obviously, with the sales company and keep them up to speed with reactions, because a distributor in Sweden, for example, wants to be able to talk to Dagens Nyheter or whatever it may be and get a sense of what their reaction critically to their film is. So communication with the sales company, feeding through reactions, feeding that sort of thing through can only help, but when they sit down with a prospective Swedish distributor, they can say, you should be aware that Dagens Nyheter and Svenska Dagbladet love this film. There is something still incredibly glamorous about films, and I think that media coverage, probably in all of your countries, for film, when you compare it to TV, theatre or music, is still pretty substantial, which is a great advantage for us. I hope you would agree with that. Thank God the job that we do is not all about the volume of coverage. You know, I may get stacks of coverage from, it does not mean to say that it's guaranteed success at the box office at all. In fact, quite the opposite. I think that sometimes overhyping of a film, particularly a more art house film, can be extremely counterproductive. It seems to me you want to get to the level where your target audience is aware of the film, but nevertheless that they can feel that they're discovering a film for themselves. And if they're discovering a film for themselves, they go and see it, and they like it, they're much more likely to then advocate for that film on your behalf with their friends and everywhere else.